G'day guys, Shawnee from Life and Tennis. Today's video I'll be discussing the US Open men's final, and yeah, what a final it was, with Alcaraz winning his 6th Grand Slam and yeah, becoming the new #1 player in the world, male player in the world, and really getting to the point now where he's starting to see a little bit of daylight between him and Sinner in terms of their head-to-head and their rivalry, but still, yeah, a fascinating rivalry, and yeah, amazing tournament from Alcaraz. Really, basically a flawless tournament. I mean, maybe not that much of a surprise in the end based on his form, but I guess leading into the US Open, everyone's picking, Sinner to win it. He won Wimbledon. He's the hardcourt king at the moment in the men's game, and Alcaraz maybe has underperformed a little bit at the 2 hardcourt Grand Slams, Oz Open and US Open. He's obviously a US Open champion, but yeah, I didn't necessarily expect him to play as well as he did throughout the whole tournament. I had a funny feeling though that Alcaraz was going to respond, just simply because losing that Wimbledon final against Sinner, I knew that he would be really, really hungry to beat Sinner on hardcourt, just because, grass and clay has seemingly been like his strongest surfaces, whereas, the 2 hardcourt slams, Oz Open and US Open, have been basically primarily Sinner's domain, essentially. So yeah, I think Carlos, he obviously did a lot of work leading into the US Open. He did really well in the US hardcourt swing leading up, winning a couple of tournaments, and I think this is his best year. Results-wise, he's won, I think, 7 titles this year, and yeah, like, he's clearly the best player in the world, probably having as good a year as, say, Sinner did last year. And yeah, just, he hasn't been fading either, at different pockets of the season. He's been very consistent throughout, which has always been, a bit of a criticism of his in the past. Well, not a criticism, but always been maybe, an area for improvement for him, where he's played really, really well, in the middle of the year, and then he's kind of faded away a bit, and hasn't really finished the year that well. But yeah, has won the last 7 of 8 matches against Sinner, which is insane, and now their head-to-head goes 10-5, which is, it's starting to look Federer-Nadal-esque at the moment, like early in their career when, Nadal got an early lead and Federer didn't really peg it back till right at the end, and then yeah, didn't really have a chance, so I guess close in on Nadal more. But I definitely think Yannick, he'll learn a lot from this. And he definitely wasn't at his best. I think anyone that watched that final will agree he wasn't at his best in the US Open final this year. He was definitely missing shots he doesn't normally miss. He didn't look physically as good as he normally does at a Grand Slam. So I'm not sure what that's all about. I know in the Cincinnati final, he retired sick, from 5-love down, and it seemed like something was not quite right with Sinner. Not to say that he carried anything into the US Open, because he did really well to make the final. Clearly still the dominant force in the men's game along with Alcaraz, but in the final it just felt like he was a little bit underdone, and as I said, making uncharacteristic errors, for his very, very lofty standards. But I think a lot of that was also the pressure that Alcaraz was putting on Sinner, and Alcaraz has also tightened up his game in the sense that he hasn't been having these, lapses in sort of concentration that he sometimes has, in the past at tournaments, where he'll play a lights out set and then it's like he tries to up the ante when he doesn't need to really do that. And, Sinner has always been the picture of consistency in most tournaments he plays at. So this time around, I feel like Alcaraz was basically the Sinner, of the tournament, where he was just just brought a very consistent level throughout all of his matches, and only dropped 1 set to Sinner. And I think the only player that could have possibly taken a set off Alcaraz is Sinner. I mean, obviously Novak, pushed him in that 2nd set when he was 3-love up, and then that went to a tiebreak in the end. But I think, in the end, Alcaraz was always going to be the stronger player. And, coming into the final, I thought he was going to win. I definitely think he went in favourite, but I still didn't necessarily think that it was going to be easy. I had a funny feeling once, if Sinner was to win a set against him, and, especially if he took the 3rd set, if he was able to maintain that level that he achieved in the 2nd, that, Alcaraz would have been a bit of a tough one to come back from, because obviously he did it at Roland Garros, but I think on hardcourt, Sinner is a bit of a front runner. When he's ahead, he's very, very hard. He's a bit like Novak. He really is a Novak 2.0, as I've always said. He's very, very hard to to come back against when he's, when he takes charge in a match, which is, I think, how Alcaraz has to beat Sinner. And what Alcaraz did really well throughout that match is he mixed it up, with lots of slicing. He also is the best player in the world in terms of taking the ball on the rise. Just his acceleration, especially on the forehand side, is unbelievable. Just how quickly he can get the ball onto his racket and pass his opponent in a flash, hitting winner after winner is just, it's just insane. It really is. And probably for me, the biggest area that Alcaraz has improved is his serve, without a shadow of a doubt. I think that was probably always one of a weaker areas of his game. He doesn't have many weak areas. Well, he doesn't have any weak areas in his game now, but his serve was probably, if there was one, it was that, particularly the second serve, but he's really strengthened his serve, clearly did a lot of work on that, and also probably did a lot of research after that Wimbledon loss, trying to figure out how do we beat Sinner here, and he came into that final with the perfect game plan and executed it basically to perfection. Obviously, he lost one set, but in the end, it was a small blip in what was otherwise a flawless performance. So yeah, well done, Alcaraz, and yeah, it just seems like now he's almost out in front to a degree of Sinner. He's number one in the world, 6 Grand Slams, youngest male player to win 6 Grand Slams, at his age of 22 in however many days it is, which is just another insane achievement. Goes up there with Nadal and all those other players that achieved Grand Slams from a young age. And look, if he's at the rate he's going, everyone always talks about he looks like he's going to catch Novak. I mean, it's still very early days. You cannot say that definitively right now. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? Injuries, other players coming up like a Fonseca might come into the equation at some point, or even someone else that we're not expecting. But at this stage, really, it's the Alcaraz show, the Alcaraz and the Sinner show. It's the Sincaraz show, as everyone loves using that term. But yeah, he's just in some unbelievable form. So there, the Oz Open will be very, very interesting. The last thing I thought I would touch on in this video is just how well both Sinner and Alcaraz have adjusted after their losses, because obviously, Sinner had that devastating, loss from his perspective, from being 2 sets to 1 up and having match points and not taking that match, or not taking the title there. And that was, an incredible comeback from Alcaraz. But then he learnt from that and ended up winning the Wimbledon final against a player who most of us thought was unbeatable on grass, given he won the last 2 Wimbledon titles. So that was an awesome effort for Yannick to learn from his loss, from his really, really tough loss at Roland Garros. And then Alcaraz has learned from his loss and come into the US Open in unbelievable form. So it's these guys they make each other better. Like I said, it's literally like Nadal, Federer back in the day, and then obviously Novak became that third wheel. But then I guess Novak had more of a rivalry, probably with Nadal. I would say he obviously had a big rivalry with Federer, but I feel like the Nadal-Djokovic rivalry was more similar to the Federer-Nadal rivalry early on, because I just feel like it was a closer rivalry, probably head-to-head, than the Federer-Nadal one was, but it was just so interesting, those two guys, whenever they came up against each other head-to-head. So yeah, we're seeing another one of those classic rivalries, and yeah, the Oz Open will be very, very interesting next year, so really looking forward to that. Anyway, guys, that's my take on the men's US Open final this year. Really, really keen to hear your thoughts and feedback. And as always, guys, please like and subscribe for more life and tennis related content. Cheers, guys.